Hello and welcome to FinextraTV. I'm Hannah Wallace and we're here at Sibos 2022. With me now to discuss CBDCs in the studio is Panos Archondakis from EPAM. Panos, great to see you again.
And you, good to be here.
Really good to have you in the studio and talking about a really interesting topic, the subject of a roundtable that we had yesterday. So speaking off the back of that, but also listening to conversations during Sibos around CBDCs, really interesting, but they tend to be predominantly in the wholesale space and in that context. So what I'm interested to hear from you is the impact of CBDCs in the retail space and how the consumer is being impacted.
Well, obviously, CBDCs is a huge topic at the moment, and it's getting a lot of attention. The roundtable started off by making the distinction between the two use cases, retail and wholesale. For the wholesale perspective, it's looking at how CBDCs could be used to facilitate interbank transfers, interactions with the central bank, possibly cross-border flows as well, but at an aggregate level. And we also talked a little bit about the retail impact, and that is a particularly interesting area for me because I'm very much focused on the consumer banking, digital transformation of banking angles. And for the consumer, the question is, how is this CBDC actually going to benefit them in day-to-day life? Will it even benefit them, or will they notice a change in day-to-day life? But at the same time, what would be the impact of CBDCs on the banking economy in general, because there is an impact, and also the infrastructure that would be required to make it operate for millions of consumers globally within a jurisdiction or across countries.
Yeah, I suppose my next question is essentially, why do we need it, and where does it fit into that discussion around entering a cashless society?
Well, I think the key point is cashless society, as you just mentioned. So as we move away from using physical cash, and we're all very familiar with using instant payments or our cards, debit cards, credit cards to make payments at merchants, that make payments online. The question is, do we need cash at all? I think that the benefit to the consumer is maybe even something that they might not notice, because there is a lot of cost rolled up into card transactions and payments in general in the world as we know it today. So there are fees that are charged to merchants, and in the end those things will trickle down to consumers, and we are paying for it even if we don't realize it. Whereas if we're exchanging physical cash, there is no merchant involved even, possibly, and the benefit to the consumer could be instant payment without the overhead of the payment infrastructure.
All right, okay, so it's interesting to hear about some of the benefits. What I want to do really is sort of take a step back, because what I'm interested to hear is what's driving this, do you think, and what are some of the maybe tensions you're seeing along the way, maybe in the future as well with this? Well,
the drivers really were one of the points that we discussed in the roundtable, in fact, and particularly looking at the business case for it. From a consumer perspective, as I've just said, there may not actually be any noticeable difference, and the way it would operate in with a digital account, possibly held with a central bank, possibly through an intermediary bank, the consumer wouldn't really notice any real difference in day-to-day use. The driver appears to be more, if not political, at least regulatory driven. But there's certainly going to be a tension, because central banks are not familiar with the large-scale infrastructure operations that would be required to host hundreds of millions of accounts, to do KYC, to do transaction monitoring and screening. And this is a function that would need to be delegated to the second tier, to commercial banks. And given that the deposits that a customer holds in a central bank digital currency would not be on the bank's balance sheet, they're essentially held with the central bank, it actually detracts from the commercial bank's business model. So I think there's certainly going to be a tension between central banks and commercial banks as to who funds the infrastructure, who operates it, and how banks can protect their existing business models.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So much to take into account, which is what I think the roundtable unveiled as well. But Panos, I'm sure we'll be continuing this discussion further down the line, but we'll leave it there for now. It's day 3, and I'll let you get back out there.
Thank you. Great to be here.